from perspectives around the state. And I think that's a pretty big ripple. And I've heard from a lot of folks who have attended that they've been able to take what they heard and what they learned back to their day job and have it help them be more inclusive to fathers. So we always want to remind people why we talk about fathers and not just parenting. I don't mean parenting in a just, but sometimes we use shorthand and shorthand doesn't tell the whole story. So for us, the reason we tell the whole story around fathers is that we know from the research and from the stories that we hear from fathers all over the state that child and family well-being improved when fathers are involved. Child and family well-being is improved across the age continuum, across the disciplines and the domains of childhood. It is conclusively part of our research. It doesn't necessarily affect our practices as much as we wish it did. So we are driven by that, and that we know that fathers play a unique role in their child's development. And I just want to say out loud that when I say fathers, it is shorthand for fathers, father figures, and kind of father parenting and mother parenting styles. And we don't in any way mean to imply that that is cisgendered, heterosexual, intact couples. We are talking about all kinds of parents who parent in that way that is typically more father-like parenting. I know that's long and rambling, but I have to say that because we've done a lot of work with same-gendered parenting. We did a marvelous session on queer dads and the myths and the realities, and what we know is that those children thrive too. So don't take the shorthand of fathers to mean we don't talk about all types of family constellations. And lastly, fathers really need to have the supports and the resources to be those dads that they aspire to be. And we are just about to embark on a study in our state of how fathers are doing and how we're doing in investing in dads. And we're excited to see how we can create a baseline so we can see movement around that over time, because there is so much opportunity. And one of the places where there is so much going on and such great opportunity is child welfare. We have child welfare partners on our council, and we've been talking for months about putting together this session for you. And we have a collective of voices from a variety of perspectives. Paula, you can go ahead and pop that forward. We're actually going to start with two gentlemen who are outside the child welfare system, who come at it from the perspective of kinship care and their own personal story. And then we have a group of professionals from the Department of Children, Youth and Families that are going to speak to different parts of the child protective system. So we are thrilled that you are here, and I am going to turn it over to Ron Murphy from KC Family Program to kind of start us off. Ron?
Good morning and welcome to today's session. My name is Ron Murphy, and I'm just going to take a few minutes to provide a perspective on the importance of relative placement, in particular, the importance of not just considering, but actively pursuing placement with fathers or their relatives. Anne has said a whole bunch, and I can't agree more with it. So she's really set, I think, a great context. I just want to say a few words about how I have viewed engagement with fathers over the last 20 plus years. And of course, what I have to say, and I think what everyone will be presenting today, is that everything that we talk about is within the context of what parents and those of us working in the system value the most, which is safety for any child. So if you've had a chance to review my bio, as I said, I've been engaged in child welfare and other social justice issues for many, many years. And over the years, I've been able to observe from different vantage points, including child welfare, substance abuse, working in community service offices, the courts, etc., how fathers and paternal relatives are often not included in conversations about best ways to support their children, whether it be therapeutic, other service delivery, or in the case of child welfare intervention, placement decisions. I've witnessed many trends, practices, policies, and projects that have an aim of improving outcomes for children and families, but have also seen how many of those efforts have not been successful. Relative and father engagement is one of the areas that has taken a very long time for the system to gain momentum around as one of the ways to support better outcomes for children. So more than one child and family service review, CFSR, as it's known to some folks within child welfare, and other reviews over the years have noted that improvement needs to be made in engaging fathers and relatives. Washington State is not alone in this area. Fortunately, Washington has been making improvements over the last several years that will be highlighted in today's session. Finally, I encourage you to actively listen and use the information provided today to reflect on your own journey, good or bad, related to how you have worked with fathers and their relatives. So with that, I turn it over to Ray.
Thanks, Ron. Hey, Ray, before you jump in, I also just want to thank Dieter Jacobs. I forgot when I was doing my introduction to acknowledge the Dad's Ally coordinator for the council, Dieter, who does all of the work to get this session to you and to provide you with links to all this information afterwards, which will be on our website, and also to shoot you an evaluation at the end. So thanks, Dieter, for all your hard work. We really love to ground these sessions in the voice of lived experience. And so Raymond has graciously offered to share his story and then how he has parlayed that personal experience into the professional hat that he plays. So thanks, Raymond. As a star member of our Fatherhood Council, we really appreciate you sharing your voice. Go, take it away, sir.
Thank you. I feel like most of these meetings talk about what's being done wrong, but this story is about what could happen when things are done right and trust is established. My name's Raymond Gregson, and hello, and I thank you for allowing me to come share my story and speak with you today. I'd like to talk to you today not only about dependency, but also about change and responsibility. To do that, I'd have to introduce you to two separate people, because though we have the same name, Raymond Gregson, we are completely different people. First, there's the person I was 8 years ago before my case was opened. I'd been using drugs for 38 years of my life. The last 10 years of that, I was in heavy addiction. I'd suffered loss, abuse, and extreme trauma. I had some mental health issues such as PTSD, depression, and a suicide attempt. I'd been in and out of trouble and jail. Many times I've been homeless, one time for 2 years. And because of my choices and my lifestyle, I did not have a very healthy relationship with my daughter. When Child Protective Services showed up to investigate and check on the safety of my child, and I was told that I might lose my daughter to the foster care system, that statement felt worse than a prison sentence. You see, I'd been a father figure in 11 children's lives, and to lose my youngest to the foster care system was terrifying. Until that point, my experiences with the system had always been a negative thing. And though my past has had a lot of struggle and hardship, my story is one of success. During my initial meeting with Child Protective Services, I felt helpless and intimidated. Some of my thoughts were, why is this happening? Why me? This is stupid. Great, this is all I need. But the biggest one was, this is not my fault. I dwelled on that for a while, and I was in victim mode. As I said, my parenting and my relationship with my daughter was unsupportive and not very healthy at the time. I came to the realization that this was not my 8-year-old daughter's fault, and it was my responsibility to fix this, no matter the fault. I got to a place that failure was no longer an option, and I quit living as a victim, because if you're placing blame or looking for fault, you're stuck in victim mode. If you're in victim mode, things won't change. Once I met my caseworker, I was surprised to hear what they had to say, and the advice they gave me changed my life. The first things that they talked with me about were expectations, both mine and theirs. Then I was offered some advice that was amazing and very unexpected. I was told that if I could see this not as them against me, but try to see them as a resource and not a barrier, They said, if I could be present, engaged, proactive, and transparent in my needs and the directions I moved from this point, that it could be a springboard, a launching pad to a better life and better parenting. They also took the time to understand my normal, where I had came from, and how I'd arrived at the place I was at that moment. They spoke to me about the meetings we would have and talked about advocacy, the difference between good and bad advocacy. They told me that you listen according to your mindset at the time of the meeting, and suggested that I always bring someone with me to help me debrief after, in case I missed or misheard something. Then they offered resources for me to start to engage with, such as the Domestic Violence Support Group, Parent for Parent program, Parenting 101, 201, 301, and a Dad's Matters class. All these things helped in everything pertaining to my case, including with the guardian ad litem that told me there was no way I'd get custody of my daughter as a single father. Then we talked about their caseload, that it might take some time for them to respond or get back to me depending on the day they were having. They said it would be my responsibility to keep them advised of what I was doing. They suggested that I stop by and leave update notes as to my progress, my needs, and the struggles I might be experiencing, that they always check those. The more they knew about what I was doing, the better they could help me get my case close. This helped me see them as equals and not as adversaries. I agreed to work with my caseworker and I started doing classes. One class led to another class and then another. I became proactive in my case and transparent in my needs and my situation. I was present and engaged in all I did from that point. Those simple things changed everything. If you do those things, be proactive, be transparent, be engaged, things will change. When you take responsibility, you take your power back. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the man I am today. I successfully completed my case. I have custody of my daughter. We've completed 16 programs, some together and some individually. I'm the first graduate of Community Court of Grace Harbor. I'm now a certified peer counselor. My daughter and I were selected to represent our county at the statewide WISE Symposium in Kennewick, Washington. I became a family partner tri-lead for the Grace Harbor FISPERT, which is the Family Youth System Partner Roundtable program. This program brings system partners, parents, and youth to come together and talk about hopes, needs, and gaps in services. My daughter became the youth tri-lead for that same program. She was the youngest tri-lead in the state of Washington at that time. Now, I'm the regional convener coordinator for the 5-county Great Rivers region for that same Family Youth System Partner Roundtable program, and I attend state meetings. I'm part of the Fatherhood Council, and that has allowed me to be here and talk with you today. I'm a basic mediator for the Dispute Resolution Center through Resolution Washington. I'm currently a resource guide specialist for 3 counties. I'm on the SUD Certification Advisory Committee for the Department of Health in the state of Washington. I'm a trainer for the Dad's Moves program, and I've opened a business called Growing Your Mindset. I facilitate a class called Unlocking Your Potential. This class helps participants find and build self-esteem, set goals, and achieve them. What it means to build an ad campaign for themselves. My daughter and I are one of 2 families featured on the Dependency 101 video for family education and support services. Out of all the things that I've done on this journey, the ones I'm most proud of are the relationship I now have with my daughter. Setting a good example and the ability to be proud of myself again. Showing her what a healthy life and relationship looks like. Watching her find her voice. She speaks out against bullying and in support of the LGBTQ community. She brings awareness to the needs of the youth in our community and volunteers at public support events. I'm so very proud of her. A few things I'd like to add are, I was 50 years old when this started, and though nothing happened overnight, my life has completely changed for the better. The tools I've gained from this, I'm able to share with my family and others. I have a son that struggled with self-harm, suicide, and lack of self-esteem. He started using this style of tools in his life. Now at 25, he has found a good job, held an apartment for over 4 years, and continues to grow as an amazing young man. My daughter found these tools, and at 12 years old, she was advocating for herself. So you see, the worker did not only impact me, but she helped break a generational problem from me at 50 to my son at 25 to my daughter at 12. Now my daughter is 15 and the regional 5-county tri-lead for that Family Youth System Partner Roundtable program that helps youth and families find their voice and choice in making change in the system and lives. Think of how many people she will impact by the time she is 50. And it all started with a dependency case and an amazing conversation of expectation and understanding. This could have gone a very different direction. And had it not been for a compassionate caseworker that helped me find hope and see possibility, if I had stayed in that space of dependency, despair, and trauma, none of these things could have happened. Today, I work with many parents that are navigating the system. The main thing I hear from them are that they don't know what to expect, that they feel unheard, that there is no communication, and the lack of support from an advocate, or not even knowing where to look for an advocate or a resource. Most of the people are scared. What I do first and foremost when I engage with a participant is listen with understanding and not to respond. Helping them navigate an often fragmented and siloed system that is often directed toward mothers being the primary caregivers in the family is often difficult and discouraging. I always try to give soft handoffs to the resources that are being offered and meet them where they are. These examples that I give are simple, but are often difficult when you enter a case with a negative mind. Helping someone find something in them that they don't see in themselves is empowering for all involved. I would like to share a short story I heard during my journey, and some of you may have heard this before. My hope is that you take this into your heart with each person that you work with. It's called the Starfish Parable. An elderly gentleman was heading to the beach for his morning beach walk, and he came over the dunes to the beach. He saw that the beach was littered with starfish. He looked up and down the beach and couldn't believe how many there were. He noticed that there was a young boy on the beach and that he appeared to be throwing the starfish back into the ocean. He walked up to that boy and he asked him, "Son, what are you doing? There are so many. What does it mean to save just one?" The boy looked up as he grabbed another starfish and said to the man, "Well, it means a lot to this one," as he threw the starfish back into the ocean. I am so grateful that my caseworker took the time with this one person because it changed everything. Success is an option for all the people that you engage with. The resources and support are out there if you're willing to find them and share in the work. This December, I will have 8 years clean. I'm here to tell you that a 50-year-old man who spent most of his life in addiction struggles can turn his life around and make a change for a healthier life and provide a good example and life for his daughter and others. So can anyone that you engage with. This path I am on started with a dependency case. Now, nothing happens overnight, and you must be willing to put in the work, but all things are possible. Thank you very much for allowing me to come and share part of my ongoing story. Now I'd like to open this up for questions, comments, and again, thank you very much for having me here today.
Thanks, Raymond. Wow. It is a gracious and generous thing to share your heart like that with a group of strangers. So you're getting lots of love in the chat. I hope you can read those feedback from folks. And it's just a great foundation for us to be thinking about a system that creates disruption, right? This is one of those places where families experience a lot of trauma and disruption. And it is wonderful to start with a story of hope. So hope for dads is what you just laid the foundation for, which is absolutely fantastic. So do read through chat. Anybody have any questions for Raymond before we shift gears here to our professionals in the field to talk about the system and what we know and what's happening now?
Yeah, I was wondering, Raymond, when you're going through the system and you're talking about meetings, did you have a lot of meetings like FTDMs or shared planning meetings? And how was that helpful, for you and, your family?
It was because the expectations were told coming in. I understood who was at the table and why they were at the table. I would often enter that space and ask, this is what I need, and how can we address that at this meeting? And what is expected of me to move to the next step? What am I lacking? And those short understandings, those little tiny conversations that often happen before the meeting or after
Oh,
my
Raymond,
journey.
your mic is cutting out a little bit there. If you can
Oh,
get
sorry.
close to it or speak up, it might help.
All right.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Yeah.
Were you able to get all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. So Raymond has a question for Raymond, but before we get to Raymond, there's also some questions floating around in the chat about resources, and this is the place where the Washington Fatherhood Council comes in robustly to say there isn't enough. And every time you go talk to your elected officials, tell them there isn't enough. And join the effort in spreading the word, there isn't enough. So have you heard the message? There isn't enough. But we did do a survey and environmental scan of resources in the state, and Dieter is just on it. So he just popped it up in the chat. So if you're looking for resources, know that this map is an aggregate of different types of resources. They're not all father-friendly resources, meaning services that are for dads by dads with curriculum that's normed for the unique needs of fathers. So when you look at the map, though, you can at least hover over those and see if those are fatherhood specific. And Raymond, can you say more specifically when you say Fathers Matter class, what was that? Who did that? What type of curriculum? If you could just briefly.
Yeah, so that was a class that was offered out of Grace Harbor County, and Bill Jones does it there. It's similar to the dynamic dads that Family Education and Support Services do, but each piece of a person's puzzle is different, and so it's important that we look at that puzzle as a whole picture of success. The Dads Matters class gives a lot of statistics of the impact of dads being in their child's life and how the importance of that can carry through to the success of the child. And so that gave me the understanding. And then some of the other classes that we took, we're in this together, that was offered by Dispute Resolution Center and the WISE program and different things, gave me the tools to actually implement the needs for my daughter. And she just took those and ran. She's really an impressive young lady.
Yeah, fantastic. And you've really, the whole breaking cycles thing, you really have. You broke that chain. So Shelley Willis, our wonderful friend and executive director of Family Education Support Services, just put the link to the Dynamic Dads class that you're talking about, and they do it in multiple counties. So we've got two quick questions here, and then we're going to switch over to our Department of Children, Youth, and Families folks, Raymond, and then Gordon, and then we'll move on.
Right.
Yes, hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you for what you just said. It just feels good, that I'm not alone. I've been going on 7.5 years clean and sober, and while being sober, I got custody of my son. Wasn't through a DCYF F case, and just a great. I was wanting to know, do you feel about barriers and constraints? Like right now, there's issues with me pulling my record for my SUDPD, and as well as my agency affiliated peer support. So I wonder, can there be a way not to bypass or jump the lines, but I don't know. While being a dad who works full time, I don't know, have you had to deal with these barriers?
Through my journey, I've had a lot of barriers, like I mentioned with the guardian ad litem, that absolutely told me that there is no possible way you'll get custody. You're a single dad with a record and different things behind you. That was a barrier, but finding an advocate, a mentor, somebody who's been there, done that, and could help me get there, was the biggest plus I found. Opening up and being transparent to what your struggles are with that advocate and moving yourself forward with that advice and trusting that the system isn't always against you. It's that we oftentimes come into a situation with a pre-existing mindset of what our expectations are. And to open up to that trust and into that vulnerability is kind of the key. And I really want to congratulate you on all you're doing, and thank you for having the voice to step up and share today. I appreciate that. If there's anything I can do to help you, I feel free to reach out. I'll put my contact in the chat, and I would love to speak with you some more.
Yeah.
Okay,
thanks,
thank you.
Raymond,
I
for
appreciate it.
sharing.
Thank you.
Gordon, do you have a quick question too?
That answered one of them.
Okay.
Raymond, amazing presentation. Oh my gosh, that was fantastic. Very inspiring. I just wondered on the classes, I'm really supportive of these fathers classes and learning how to be a better father. One of my concerns, and I just wanted to get your take, is that I feel there might be a perception that men or fathers need these classes, but mothers don't. And I'm wondering what your take is on that.
I actually found that there's so many more classes for the mothers, or that
Oh,
are
good, good.
directed toward the mothers, than the fathers have access to. And oftentimes when a father steps into that space, they're looked down upon, or the language in the class is directed specifically to the men being the perpetrator or these kind of things. So to get the strength to not be embarrassed to be in those classes and just be that only dad in there, it takes courage. And once you do that, then you can be the impact where that language is redirected to more inclusive to dads. So I would encourage any father to step into a space that is a mother's only class, because the information is amazing, but knowledge is only information unless it's applied and shared. And so how do we get to a space of actually engagement? And so that's what I would recommend. And there are so many classes out there.
Yeah.
And
there are also curricula that are targeted at fatherhood inclusion for moms. And I was just quickly looking at the chat to see if Ron Houndstein is here, and maybe Nelson also uses the Understanding Dads portion of the, oh, there he is. You can speak to this better than I can, Nelson, but there's great work happening in that area around supporting moms to support fathers, because that's part of the narrative, right? Moms can either be a great facilitator of that relationship, or they can be a gatekeeper. Nelson, what do you want to add? And then we got to move on, because we got a bunch of folks from DCYF ready to share. Turn your mic on, sir.
There we go, unmute. Luckily, I'm not long-winded. All I wanted to say is, and it kind of gets to our program, this is why we built a program that was not father exclusive, because the whole point here is it's not moms versus dads or dads versus moms. Kids need both equally. And that's where we need to get our system to. We need dads and moms working together in teamwork. And that's what we try to promote, which is why our organization now has an equal amount of female peers as well as male peers, because we need to, it's more important to get both to work together towards a common goal of raising their child successfully.
Thanks for saying that. It absolutely is. And that is why our Fatherhood Summit, which Dieter will also put in the chat in just a second, is targeting co-parenting this year, our 5th annual summit. That is the whole focus. And there is a wonderful organization, a national organization that is one of the founding fathers of the fatherhood movement. This gentleman's been working for 30 years to promote this work. And they wrote a Children's Bill of Rights. And the first sentence in the Children's Bill of Rights is that children have the right to be cherished by both parents. And then the second sentence is your message, Raymond, about, and a child has the right to have both parents step up and be responsible and do the right thing. That's my very edited version of what the Children's Bill of Rights says. But it is always about families. It is always about families and communities. And so I love it, Raymond, that is a big part of your story. So we are going to shift gears here. We have maybe some more time at the end, but Paula McJohnson, who is our contact at the Department of Children, Youth and Families, who's taken on this gargantuan task of adding on top of her regular job, how we support fathers, has amassed a wonderful group of folks here to talk about different parts of the front end of our child protective child welfare system. And we are going to start with Heidi and Kelly talking about relative placement. So you guys take it away and do a little quick introduction, 1 or 2 lines of each of you as you start your piece so people know where you come from. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks for having us. So my name is Heidi Walker. I'm the program manager for Relative Search and for Native American Inquiry. I've been with the department just over 17 years, started out in CPS, have done case carrying, facilitated FTDMs.
Oops, wait a minute.
Oh, go ahead.
Alphabet soup there.
Oh, family team decision making.
Thank you.
Meetings. Sorry, FTDMs. Worked with at-risk youth and was a tribal liaison for several years as well. So we're here today to talk to you about relative search and how really that impacts fathers. Kelly is the supervisor for relative search, and I'll have her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Kelly Lutz, and I have been supervising the relative search unit for about 6 years now. I just celebrated my 18th year of employment here at the department and spent the first half of my career working in Indian child welfare and supervising Indian child welfare social work. Really excited to be here today, and it's so great to see such a huge and diverse group of people here. This has definitely been an area the department has struggled to do well for a long time. And I think, getting fathers identified and getting relatives involved from the beginning is like the best way to start to include fathers in a better way and their families as well. So that is done unofficially by the CPS investigators and family voluntary service workers. But once children have come to a place where they've either voluntarily been placed into care by their parent, or whether the department has become involved in the way of involving the court, that's when a formal relative search is completed by our unit. That work is required by federal law, so it's actually required in every state. How every state does that looks a little bit different. We have a centralized unit that completes that work, so it takes that workload out of the social worker's hands. The most important part is for fathers to establish paternity, because in terms of our legal ability to pursue a relative search, a formal relative search, we have to have paternity established. We've relied really heavily on our partners in the Department of Child Support Enforcement to help us with that, help our department with that in the past, but some of that's shifting. And the department will be needing to work really closely with fathers and their families to establish paternity internally as quickly as possible at the beginning of a case. So once paternity is established, irregardless if a child is placed already with maternal family or other suitable supports that are familiar with the child, we still need to complete a paternal search to include all 3 degrees of relationship in a father's family. So helping dads that you work with, or fathers, if you're a father yourself involved with the department, ensuring that the social worker is following up and making sure that they're referring your case to be processed by our unit, because whether the child's already placed in a placement, even if it's a placement fathers feel good about with the mother's family, father's family has a right, and the child deserves to have paternal family involved in their lives as well. So I guess the other piece I would say about that is, especially when paternity is established later in the game, later into a case that's maybe been open for a long period of time, sometimes the department CASAs, I can't remember what it stands for. I know I'm using soup, sorry, but court-appointed
Special advocate.
Thank you. May be hesitant to look at placing a child out of a placement they've been in for a long period of time, but the department is obligated to contact all 3 degrees of father's family and include them, no matter how late in the game it is, So making sure that, again, if you're in the role of an advocate or if you're a father yourself, speaking up loudly about that happening.
So I just wanted to reiterate, who's a relative in Washington State? So Kelly mentioned that we would search out to the third degree of relations. And this is just kind of a quick chart so you folks can understand how far we're reaching out. We're looking out to great grandparents and all relatives below there. This is a definition of Washington State's relative. Each state, like Kelly said, this is a federal requirement for all states to seek out relatives. So each state has their own definition of relative, but for ours, we are including out to the third degree of relation. If you want to go to the next slide, we can talk about when does the relative search process start? So we need to get this search completed within that first 30 days when a child is removed from their parent or guardian. And like Kelly said, by law, paternity has to be established for us to include paternal relatives in this search. If it is not established and we cannot find proof that it's either been court ordered or there's DNA testing on file or something uploaded for us to confirm with, then we only can send out to those maternal relatives. We used to rely heavily on Division of Child Support for establishing paternity. Our cases would get referred over there automatically, and recently that has changed. So it's really up to the fathers to work with their social workers to get paternity established. We definitely wanted to point out to dads that even if your child is placed with a maternal relative, we would still hope that you could work with your social worker and just ask, hey, were my relatives contacted during the search? We think it's so important for your relatives to still have a voice in the case. And that could just be through coming to meetings with you, coming to court, helping with visitation or offering respite to that care provider. Kelly, can you think of anything else that paternal relatives might be able to do in the case? I know we have for our older youth, family members are involved with just sending texts, emails, checking in with those kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered the majority of them. I think even sometimes if it's not involving the children specifically, but it's nice for fathers to have support from their family when attending family team decision making meetings, or even just sitting in the courtroom during court reviews. The courts, in my experience as a direct line social worker and supervisor, will inquire if family in the courtroom has anything they'd like to share. So I think, outside of supports to the child, it's excellent for us to involve paternal family to support the reunification process in general. I did see in the chat a statement about genetic testing alone does not make you a legal father, but for our terms in relative search through the Department of Children, Youth, and Family, if we have the genetic testing proof that paternity has been established, we do not need to wait for the formal order to be established before we move forward with contacting paternal family.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I do want to hang with that for a minute longer, because this is a really complicated area that there is a lot of confusion around. So just a couple things. One, our language changed in our state a few years ago, and we talk about parental establishment rather than paternity, so that it recognizes it may not always be the male that we're establishing parentage with. And Leland, I noticed that you put in the chat a link to what the department can do, the division, can do at child support. Do you have a 1 or 2 line statement that you could make about the role that the Division of Child Support plays that you might be able to share?
Well, hi, this is Leland. I just wanted to say, basically, if we can get dads to come for, we will provide DNA testing with the participation of the other parent. And I've had a lot of situations where the mom would call up and then the dad would call up later. And I said, if you guys can agree to this, we can get this done pretty simple. And we get it established right away for them. As soon as we possibly can, of course, because it goes through the prosecuting attorney's office. But if we can get them to even sign the paternity acknowledgement, because some of them don't even realize that they can sign the paternity acknowledgement and have it notarized and be submitted to the Department of Health. That cuts out a lot of red tape, and it's pretty quick and simple. If they can get the information, sometimes it's beneficial for them.
Thank you, Leland. So there's been some other folks in the chat who've had other thoughts, but one of the things that I do know from having talked to our marvelous and wonderful collection of fatherhood specific programs around the state, they are a great resource. They have a lot of folks who are navigating these systems. And so a lot of times lived experience in those programs will have some support. I know some of our programs, actually a couple that are on the call today, have even done legal clinics. That's maybe an overstated language, but times when people can come together to get advice around how to interact with the family court system and maybe even the dependency court system. So it is, I think the message is reach out and ask and just understand parental acknowledgement and establishment is a process that is super important to establish as soon as possible. And I think a lot of dads don't even understand that they say, well, I'm the dad. Well, not if you weren't married at the time of the birth. And so you're not a party to the case and you can't do anything, and in every system, not just child welfare. Okay, any other last thoughts from you all before we shift gears to the family team decision-making meetings?
Go ahead, Kelly. I was just talking about the tribal piece, the Native
great. Yeah.
ancestry, just because that's also in my wheelhouse under our programs. And so when our social workers are supposed to be asking the parents beginning of the case, at any case transfer, meetings with the families, if they have tribal heritage or Indian ancestry. And so if a father has not been asked this, I would really encourage for them to speak up. If they are affiliated with the tribe, it's so important that we then get the tribe notified so they can be on board and be a support for that family, or possibly even take jurisdiction of the case. So I would just encourage, like I said, if a dad has not been asked this question or has not relayed that information to the social worker or to the court, that's huge for them. Kelly, anything more on that?
Not on that, but I just wanted to say one more thing about the birth certificate and paternity is that we often will have children that enter our system and get involved in the relative search program that have been born out of state. And if the mother doesn't supply the birth certificate at the time that the department becomes involved, it can take quite some time for the department to get the birth certificate from other states. So if there are fathers that you're working with, or if you are a father where that situation applies, at least for the relative search units purposes, all we even need is a photograph taken and texted or emailed to the social worker for us to see an official birth certificate, for us to move forward on that paternal search, which could really shorten the time frame that paternal family in or out of the state are having to wait to be contacted while we wait for that other state to get us the official birth certificate. So that was the last thing I had to share.
Thanks. So one other quick question about, Leland talked about a process when mom is in agreement. What about when mom is a barrier to establishing parentage? Any tips around how fathers would navigate that or what the process is like?
It's different with, go ahead, Leland.
No, you're right, Kelly. It is different depending on the situation. And I try to give them the best other options to pursue, because Dieter has provided me with information that I try to share for each different situation, but Kelly may have more that she can say on that topic, because I usually try to refer them out to someone else, especially legal counsel.
If the department's involved, I would say that situation is easier to navigate because there's other legal interest in establishing paternity and other legal responsibilities in establishing paternity and involving any fathers. So I would say that it is, if there were a benefit to being involved with the department, an additional benefit would be that, because we are obligated to pursue that. I would say that the one situation where, again, there can be problems is if we don't have a good way of contacting or locating the father. We've been unsuccessful in locating the father, and the mother's not helpful in that situation. That could be a barrier. That would be, but the department is obligated, if somebody is named as an alleged, presumed, or confirmed father, to be making contact with that person, involving them in the dependency process.
Okay, Twisha, do you have a very quick comment? Because we're getting a little bit behind here. We've got so much more to share. One other quick thought, and then we're going to move on.
Thank you, Ann. Yeah, so the comment was that these are DCYF dependency cases. And yes, DCYF helps them to establish paternity, but as far as getting the paternity acknowledgement for the information to be put onto the birth certificate, that has been the barrier with the DCYF cases. And so what I'm hearing from you, Kelly, is that this is something that DCYF is supposed to follow through on to the end?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ann.
Yeah, and someone mentioned Finding Fathers. I don't hear too many of those programs anymore. Some have kind of come and gone, but that is another resource that some counties have in helping bring dads into the case. Thanks, you two. Really appreciate this. And as you know, we know from interacting with families, this is a really complicated issue. And again, back to my earlier comment, not enough resources, not enough resources, not enough resources to help people navigate it. It looks like there are great resources around DNA testing, though, through the department and through child support and other places that people can get testing. So that's great. We are going to move on. I am going to turn it over to Paula and Joseph to talk about family team decision meeting. And if you guys can maybe squeeze it into 15, that would be great.
Yes, so I can kind of start. So my name is Joseph. I work with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. I am a program consultant, and so I facilitate shared planning meetings. Prior to that work, I was a ongoing social worker, so I work with folks like Raymond within a dependency case. So I have that experience of about 6 years working directly with families and children to obtain permanency. Paula, did you want to introduce yourself, or do you want me to go on from here?
I can introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Paula Mike Johnson. I'm the engagement program manager in headquarters. I have 17 years of experience in child welfare in both Michigan and Washington. I've been in the social worker in the field in both CPS and in child welfare and family services. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Alrighty. And I am a father of 2 boys, so I just want to add that in there. But I facilitate shared planning meetings. So one, it's, kind of, we'll go into the shared planning meetings, but it's very crucial, one, for fathers to be a part of these meetings. There's 2 folds of a shared planning meeting. So we have like FTD, family team decision-making meetings. And then we also have permanency planning meetings, which I'll get into those 2 different types of meetings here in the next couple slides. But really during these meetings, we want parents to be invited. We want any other resources that they find, whether that be family members, friends, even providers that want to come on their behalf to speak on how they're doing. But we're going to be talking about safety threats within these meetings. We're going to talk about permanency goals for their children and how to get there. And so we're really going to have a game plan for parents to achieve permanency. And then I think we can move on to the next slide, because I'll dive deeper into those 2 different meetings. And so for family team decision-making meetings, they follow the shared planning meeting module of engaging families and others who are involved with the family to participate in critical decisions regarding the removal of their children from their home, placement, stabilization, and prevention, and reunification or placement into a permanent home. So typically we have family team decision-making meetings when a child comes into care. We want to invite all the parties, parents. We're going to be talking about the reasons as to why the children are in care or were recently removed. And then we're going to talk about if the children have to be within outside of the home of the parents. We're really going to get the father's intake on what they want for their children. So that's where it's important, one, for fathers to be invited, which kind of goes back onto the department to making sure they're there at the table. Because if they're not there, they're not invited, then obviously we can't get their perspective. Mothers in this typical situation where we have family team decision-making meetings, it's crucial that if we have alleged fathers, they let us know, so that way we can do our due diligence and making our efforts to reach out to those fathers. And so during these meetings, we're going to definitely ask the fathers and the mothers what they prefer in regards to placement. If we have to place outside the home, we always prefer relatives. So that's the initial front line of us finding those relatives and really going through and making sure we can, if all possible, place with relatives. From that point on, we're going to be talking about the things the department needs to see to be able to move forward with reunification. So we'll definitely have recommended services at that time for parents to engage in. And then really, yeah, that's more or less the purpose of the family team decision-making meetings.
And Joseph, are you going to talk in a future slide about how that plays with justice-involved fathers?
I don't know if Paula can hit on.
Okay,
that
if
when-
one of the two of you could address that, that would be great. Sorry to
Okay.
jump in, go ahead.
No worries. And then to move on to permanency planning meetings. Yeah, so permanency planning meetings, I more or less specialize in these specific meetings. The purpose of these meetings is to come together within certain times of the dependency cases. So the first one we're going to have is within 6 months of the case. The next one is usually 9 to 11 months of the case being open. We have a 15-month and an 18-month. After that time frame, we typically try to have them every 3 months or so. So really the purpose of the permanency planning meetings is to come together as a team, the social worker, the attorneys, the parents, obviously the father, and their prospective folks to help them through the meeting, whether that be family members, other significant others. And we're going to be talking about safety, permanency, and well-being. And so we're going to be talking to the caregiver, whoever has a child at that time, on how the children are doing. That's a good time, and these are good meetings for parents to ask the caregivers directly what's going on, if there's any issues. We really want to foster that relationship at these meetings in hopes that fathers can have regular contact with the caregivers and getting updates on the children. Permanency is the next one. We're going to be talking about where we are and what we need to see in regards to being able to return the children home, if that's the primary option. We're going to be talking to the fathers about services, really try to engage them and identify any barriers that they have to be able to move forward. So again, it's crucial for, social workers, DCYF staff to get the fathers to the meeting. In my particular role, and when I facilitate permanency planning meetings, to do my due diligence, I, obviously let the social workers know that, remind them to invite the parents. But at the meetings, before we begin, I do ask if we don't have either parent, mother, or father. I ask them what their efforts were to locate them, to get them to the table, because I want to make sure we're doing everything we can. And if we need to, we can always reschedule these meetings if we didn't, do our best to get them to the table. I also want to preference that for fathers who are incarcerated, it's our, responsibility to reach out to those local jails or prisons. Or if they're in treatment facilities, we want to make sure we're reaching out to those facilities to get them to the table, because it's, by not having them at the meeting, we're missing their voice. And we're missing our opportunity to get them and to get them moving in regards to letting them know that their voice matters and, they're a crucial part of their children's lives. And so really that's the purpose of the permanency planning meetings. And so I hope, Raymond and other folks, I know you all talked about FTDMs, family team decision-making meetings. I hope Raymond, in your case, you had positive experience within these meetings and helping you, obviously come together, identify services and ways that the department can help out fathers moving forward. Paula, I don't know if you wanted to hit on the other aspect.
What was the other aspect?
Anna, was
Yeah,
it?
and was it incarcerated parents? Is that what you're
Yeah,
talking
I don't mean to sidetrack us because we really do
Yeah.
need to keep moving here. I just wanted to note that oftentimes when fathers are incarcerated, it's really difficult to involve them in their kids' cases.
Mhm.
And that we've seen that really go badly, where parents have lost access to the process. And so I know this is an area that you all are working on, but I just wanted to raise this as a hot spot in the system.
Yeah, and I'll just add that definitely I was a facilitator prior to this position, and it's really just really reaching out to those locations where the fathers are and making sure you're reaching out days in advance so they can prepare to come. And and I think it's when we have virtual meetings, it's fathers can zoom in, they can call in, and it's just taking those steps to make sure that you're reaching out to those facilities where they're located and giving them time to prepare to come to the meeting. And I would always send the agenda so the father could then prepare in advance, because it can be quite intimidating to come to a group of people that you don't know and you can't see.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna go to Shannon next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shannon Quinn. I'm a permanency outcome facilitator with DCYF. I'm on the permanency from day one team. We are funded through a federal grant. So I'm still on the same topic of permanency planning meetings and family team decision-making meetings. Our team is just a little bit different. So we're a statewide team. We have representatives in regions 4, 1, and 6. So 4 is King County, region 1 is out in the Spokane area, region 6 is down south in the Kelso and Vancouver areas. And so what we do is we have taken the shared planning meeting concept and we've really tried to build on it, make it more robust. We have some key components that you can see on the slide here. We have independent assigned facilitators. So in a lot of cases, facilitators are assigned to the same chain of command that the social worker and the supervisor are assigned to. And so we're independent facilitators. We have a different chain of command. So we remain neutral in these meetings. We don't have a position. We're able to take everybody's voice and incorporate that in an equal way. It's a little bit different for families. We also have increased engagement through pre-meets and invitations. And so when I say the word pre-meet, what I mean is that we on my team, we have the opportunity to reach out to all key participants in these cases and families ahead of time. So I think I saw somebody put it in the chat, reaching out ahead of time to talk about these meetings. And so we're able to call the caregivers, the mothers, the fathers, any other relatives and supports who are involved in this family. And we ask parents, who do you want to have at this meeting as a support for you? Are you able to attend? How can we help facilitate your attendance? Do you have access to Zoom? Do you need any assistance? We have those conversations in advance. We can talk to parents about what are the things you want to talk about during this meeting? How do we make this meeting useful to you and support you in the things that are important to you? And we also, as we're doing those pre-meets, we're able to review the case file and we have the time to say, hey, I noticed that the father, we don't have contact information for him. Let's go dig further. Let's find through the resources that we have available to us, through databases, through family connections. How do we find this person? How do we include them and invite them? So we were able to build that extra layer of support because we have a little bit more time and we have assignment to each family that we're working with. We remain consistently assigned to that family throughout the lifetime of their case. We also are responsible for those invitations going out. And so, not only are we just asking the social worker what their efforts have been, but we're also including our efforts. So we're trying to find and engage those parents, especially including fathers. And I will say, being aware of DOC's policies when it comes to incarcerated parents is really helpful and important, knowing and being able to guide social workers and say, hey, listen, when it's an FTDM, there's a particular form we submit and you can get DOC to bring parents who are incarcerated on via Zoom. It's a permanency planning meeting. They have to call in. They have 20-minute blocks they can call in. So just understanding those processes, we're able to provide that layer of support because we're familiar and we do this on a regular basis. The other thing that's a little bit unique about our team is that we do permanency planning meetings every 90 days. And so we heard from Joseph a little bit about like the policy timelines where we wait the first 6 months until we have a permanency planning meeting normally. On our team, we try to get that first permanency planning meeting scheduled within 30 to 45 days of the establishment of dependency. So we're trying to get families engaged early. and meeting more often, every 3 months, right from the very beginning of the case, so that there's no lapse in communication or collaboration. We want to be getting together regularly so we can see, is everybody getting the support that they need? Does everyone have the resources that they need? What else can we do to help and support this family to move things forward? And then the other thing that we sort of established maybe by accident is because we began during COVID times, we started doing Zoom meetings instead of in-office meetings. And we've noticed that these are a neutral meeting location. So whereas coming into a DCYF office can be really scary, transportation can be difficult, it can even be traumatizing for people to come into our offices because bad things have happened there in the past. We're able to come together in a neutral meeting setting over Zoom. People feel more comfortable, generally have more access because it's not a transportation issue. And we can get relatives. So when we're talking about father engagement, family engagement, relative engagement, I've had families come and participate in meetings from as far away as Peru, which was pretty amazing, actually, that we had lots of relatives present, and it just didn't matter where they were geographically located. We were able to engage grandparents. I have a case where the paternal grandparents live in Louisiana, and we are able to have regular meetings with them and engage them in conversations because we're having these meetings over Zoom instead of in person at the office where they would not be present with the rest of the team. Some of our principles are around transparency, inclusion, and respect. And so that's the way that we go into these meetings all the time, is we're trying to be transparent with families about what's happening. We want to include them in decision-making. So not just letting them talk, but really have their voice direct our case planning, and respecting people, which of course takes myriad different approaches. But that is, I would say, overall the permanency from day one approach. And if anybody has questions, I can answer questions and send out more information afterwards. I know we're running out of time, so I'll wrap it up.
Move on. But thank you for sharing. This sounds like this should be offered to everybody eventually, right? Hopefully that's the goal.
That is our goal. We would love that.
Who's next, Paula? Ah, Teresa.
Well, hello, everyone. I feel very privileged to be here to talk about the dependency court process timeline. My name is Teresa Froberg. I am the Child Protective Services and Family Voluntary Services Program Manager at headquarters, so I'm statewide. Before I go into this, I want to talk a little bit about before we get to this, because I feel like we shouldn't just jump into, and I haven't been here the whole time, so maybe that we've gone into this a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about the fact that that a dependency is not necessarily a removal. First of all, you can file a dependency and not remove a child, but most of the time people at this point in DCYF, people think of dependency and removal as the same. And we really have an entire process around removal. We only remove children when they are unsafe. Now that assessing, we have an entire framework for how we assess safety, and that is child-centered. So when we're assessing the safety of a child, whether they live with the mother or the father, we are supposed to be assessing both of those parents. So if you get to a point where you are in the process of removal and you're at an FTDM or another shared planning meeting as it goes along, I want to make sure that you understand is that you can ask questions. And because we have that framework around assessing safety, and safety is directly associated with removal. So if your child is not unsafe, your child should not be removed. So for you to ask exactly like, how did you get to your decision? And so then if you now understand why we got to the decision around removal, that then you can provide additional information, and maybe that decision can change based on additional information. DCYF always wants to assess based on the gathered information, and if we don't have all the information, then we really can't truly assess effectively and accurately, right? So, and then we also want to make sure that you understand why we have determined your child is unsafe, because we want you to understand how you can, what you need to change. It needs to be very clear to you what exactly needs to change in order for your child not to be unsafe, because that will determine when your child can, what steps you take in order to get your child back. So I wanted to say that first. Secondly, we have had initiatives going on in DCYF that have significantly reduced the amount of children that are coming into care. So we are getting better and better at assessing safety. And so whereas like 5 years ago, I think our average was around between 7,000 and 8,000 kids removed during a year, we're now around a little over 4,000. So we really have significantly reduced the amount of children coming into care. And we want to continue that because we really do value family, and that includes fathers, not just mothers. When I know our system is very mother-centric, but it includes both because it's really about the safety of that child when we're removing children. A dependency actually has, you can have a dependency where your child is not removed. And that really is around making sure that you receive the services that getting the court to intervene without necessarily removing your child so that we can prevent removal. So the process begins with a CPS referral regarding abuse or neglect. The referral is evaluated, it's screened in or screened out. Now we have a fairly low percentage of screened in. So it's less than 40% of our cases are actually screened in for investigation or a family assessment response. So whereas, and I feel like people don't really understand that component, that we actually don't just screen in, it has to meet our statute, our actual laws around screening in for intervention. If we then go through, so there's a big process here between CPS referral and child is placed in protective custody, a massive process here that we're not talking about in this dependency court process timeline. But if then the child is determined that they need to be removed, and this is talking about protective custody, there are multiple ways that a child can actually be brought into care. One of them is a protective custody where law enforcement or a hospital administrator sign that child into care. Another is that the department requests for a judge to sign a pickup order. And then another one is through a voluntary placement where basically we feel like your child is unsafe, but can be, we feel like we can rectify it pretty quickly and we don't actually need to file for dependency. So if your child is placed into protective custody, we have to have a shelter care hearing, decide whether we're moving forward, first of all, within 72 hours. So sometimes we have a protective custody where a police officer will say, you know, this child needs to come into care. And then we have an FTDM, we do more gathering of information, and we realize that that child might have been in danger in that very moment, but we can keep that child safe. So, or we can put a safety plan, or the child is unsafe, but we can put a safety plan in place actually so that they are returned home. But if we move forward in a dependency, there is a dependency, a shelter care hearing within 72 hours. Now that shelter care hearing, you may agree that your child needs to be in care. You will be assigned an attorney. The child will be assigned a guardian ad litem or a CASA. And basically there's a lot of people that will enter your life at this point. But at this point you have a shelter care hearing. So the standards for evidence are lower at this hearing than later on and at the fact-finding hearing. So it's basically like the caseworker can testify to everything they found within looking at whether the child needed to come into care. So they can testify to all the evidence that comes in. They can testify to doctors that they've talked to. They can testify to all of those things. But this is the shelter care, where basically you will agree to that shelter care, or you can have a full shelter care hearing, or you can set it over for, like, usually that's like a week, so that you can prepare, talk to your attorney more, decide whether you want an actual a full hearing, or if you want to agree to that. The next hearing is the continued shelter care hearing. So within 30 days, the case comes back to court, and you will, the court then reviews that if there's been any changes that have made. So at this point, you can ask for your child back if changes have been made that we believe now that we can keep your child safe. Because really, this all comes down to the safety of your child. And really, I think that we can all get behind making sure that children are safe, because we don't want significant injuries to happen. We don't want severe, debilitating things to happen to your children. It's just how we get there is sometimes what really the issue is.
Hey, Teresa, we need to wrap this in about a minute.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, Paula's still got quite a bit of things she wants to share too. So if you could do the last few steps and kind of
Okay, perfect.
that'd be great.
Thank you for letting me know that. So then at the, then if fact finding is held within the 75 days, this is when your child, it's determined if your child is a dependent of the court. So this is where all those higher standards are. The witnesses have to come in. This is the official, your child is now dependent. Generally at the same time, right after your child has been determined to be dependent or not dependent. If they've been determined to be dependent, there's a deposition hearing, and this is where you basically have all your services ordered depending on what needs to happen in order to keep your child safe long-term. From that process, every 6 months, you're going to have a hearing, and you can have a hearing in between if requested, that is put on, that reviews what you have done, any changes that have been made, if you're in your services, what progress you have made. And then some of those are called permanency planning hearings, which are every 12 months, where you actually look at the permanency of your child. The permanency is always going to be initially to return children home, because that's what we want to make sure that we're doing. At some point, the permanency could change for adoption or guardianship, or return or remain as return home. But basically every 6 months from that time, you're going to have a hearing in order to present that information to the court and let the court decide what's going to happen from there.
Wow, thank you. It's a lot of information for people to process, but we just wanted you to see how complicated the system is and how hardwired some of these dates are. So now we're going to really switch gears here to some of the work that's happening at the department around fatherhood engagement. So Paula, take us home here, my dear.
I just want to give Teresa a chance to answer that one question in the chat, because I think that's really important, around how the department determines a child's unsafe.
So we, first of all, could have an entire session on this. We have a safety program manager, but basically we identified the domain where there is the risk factor. And until we have identified that they're unsafe, it is considered a risk, right? So like substance use is not necessarily a safety threat until we have gone through. The first step is gathering all the information. The second step is actually like identifying the domain of concern. The third step goes through an entire threshold that really looks at like the severity, that what is going to happen if that child is not removed, or their safety plan is not put in place. What is going to happen to that child? And there has to be severe consequences. It has to be timely. So there's an entire threshold. And then if we decide that child is unsafe, then the next step is actually around if we can safety plan with the family in order to keep that child safe in the home. So it is an entire framework, and we could have an entire session just on that, but it is important to know that there's a threshold, that there is a framework around it.
Right. Yes, I think that's a good idea. Maybe in the future, looking at a session around that. I see quite a few questions about that in the chat, and it's a much more in-depth conversation than we can have right now. Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
And I'm trying to get to my next slide. It's just taking me a minute. Sorry, everyone. My Zoom is frozen. There we go. Okay, so what I get to talk about is the Engaging Fathers campaign. So DCYF currently has a Fathers Matter page, and there's not a lot of information on it. And I often get requests from fathers who are wanting more information. So we have really looked at refocusing on how we engage fathers and making that a priority and a focus. So we're relaunching an entire engaging fatherhood campaign, and that we have regional fatherhood leads. So every region in the state has a lead that comes. I meet with them once a month, and we talk about different topics around fathers. The website isn't ready yet, but it'll be announced on the digest soon. And how we created that website was I had reached out through Anne, through the Washington Fatherhood Council, and asked folks what they want to see on the website, what's important to them, what would be useful for them. And we took all of that input and feedback, and we compiled it into our new website. So I'm super excited to share that when it comes out. And we also are going to be having a monthly newsletter starting in June with the same kind of information that the folks shared. I got a lot of feedback, and it was really valuable feedback, and it was nice to see different perspectives of what different people are wanting. So we appreciate that. And then we have a father recognition. It's the first time we're doing this, and we have a call for nominations out right now. It's in the digest, and Caregiver Connections, and we're looking for nominations for fathers who are engaged in the process and had been involved in a dependency in the last 12 months. And fathers are going to receive all expense paid trip to Great Wolf Lodge for 2 days. That includes food and transportation. And we're very, very excited about that. So if there's providers out there who want to nominate, please reach out to social workers. If out there who want to be nominated, let your social worker know that. We're hoping to get lots of nominations.
And we sent the nomination out through our big list, which is about
fantastic.
1,400 folks, and we can send it out again if you want to resend it to Dieter. That would be getting it to a really broad audience as well.
Yeah, fantastic. We will do that. And that the deadline on that ends April 30th. We may extend it a bit because it got out a little late. But we hope to get lots of nominations. And one of the requests that were asked for, we had some requests around data, and I wanted to just share our DCYF practice improvement page, and the link is here in the box. But this is where you can find, Ron had talked earlier about the Child and Family Services Review. We talk about our PIP, which is our Program Improvement, Annual Progress and Service Review. And then another really important piece of the information that we are having now is the DS lawsuit settlement. So I know, Anne, you had shared that with anyone who could give stakeholder input, lived experience feedback. We have that data, we have it collected today. We're going to start reviewing it. But on this page is where you can see the progress we're making on those system improvements that were identified in the DS lawsuit settlement. And it also gives you lots of different information that was asked for. We didn't have time to go into each separate thing, but you can click on this link here and follow that. And Andrew's going to put this in a document, right? Okay. And last but not least, I would like to thank DCYF would like to thank and acknowledge the Washington Fatherhood Council Photo Bank for the use of some of the photographs included in this presentation today. These photos are a collection of photos donated by fathers to meet the demand for royalty-free photographs depicting fathers and their children. And I just felt it was really important to use those photos, and it was just a pleasure to review all the photos that were in there. So thanks everyone for sharing those.
Yeah, aren't they wonderful?
They
And the
sure are.
last one of that dad that you just had, the program lead, is in the meeting. And if I'm not right, if not wrong,
Right here?
Ron, isn't he the dad that had been separated from his son for about 5 years and through the fatherhood program got reunited? Am I thinking of the right dad?
No, that's that's a different dad.
Different dad. Yeah. So I don't want to portray any of these families in any of these photos as any connection to any of our systems. We just randomly put them out there, but I just love his enthusiasm. These two
Yes.
together are quite
It was a
pair.
perfect photo for this page. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that's the winner.
Yeah.
Yes,
So-
I know this gentleman.
Oh, you don't, you know him. Okay.
Yes,
So
his
we
name's
have a couple-
Cameron, and I took a class with him.
Oh,
So
cool. We
He's
have
a
a
class
couple-
facilitator.
Couple questions rolling around in the chat about domestic violence and how that plays in the dependency process. This is also one of those really complex issues that we don't really have a whole bunch of time on, but if there's any possibility that you could just talk a little bit about how those allegations play in the midst of a dependency case at the beginning in the fact finding. Yes, the slides will be on our website by about Monday-ish. It usually takes a couple days for them to translate the recording into the YouTube version and get that up, and then we'll put a PDF of these slides. And I just noticed, Dieter, if you could change the links to the actual URL, because it'll be a PDF, people won't be able to click through most likely, or anyway, just making sure they can get to any of the links that are in the slides would be great. So who wants to tackle the DV intimate partner coercion question? Teresa, you've got your mic on.
What's the question?
So when there are allegations of abuse that are or allegations of intimate partner violence happening in the context of a dependency, how does that play out? Like, for example, CASAs or guardian ad litem's roles, how do you go through the short version of how you might go through the process to determine if those are real or not? I mean, it seems like there's a couple questions in the chat about how that dynamic plays out in early stages of fact finding.
So first of all, we also have a framework around domestic violence, assessing domestic violence. If a domestic violence is, if it's alleged, then we basically go through a whole process of doing an assessment of that, which may include doing an official assessment outside of our system. I think sometimes there is, and what some of the fathers may have experienced is that sometimes fathers we have a very female-centric system. And so as a female, sometimes what I have seen is that because fathers may come across more gruff, more loud, there is sometimes an assumptions that domestic violence is actually happening just because of that, the way fathers may present. We need more than that. We need to actually be digging into domestic violence. Really is around control and coercive actions. And so we really need to be looking at that more in detail and finding additional information out about that domestic violence. Just because somebody says there's domestic violence, we need to be assessing further. And that's actually within our framework of around assessing that. So it's not just, oh, somebody said there's domestic violence, so we're just going to believe them. Not that we shouldn't believe, alleged victims, but we should gather more information in order to do a full assessment of that.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want people to hear the level of due diligence and process around that. Paula, you have a thought?
I would just add, when there is domestic violence, that does not exclude either parent from attending meetings and being involved with their children, unless there's a no contact order by the court. So if there's a no contact or there's domestic violence between parents, we would just have separate meetings. So we would have like a father go first and then a mother go next, but we wouldn't have them in the same meeting. But I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that even if domestic violence is a challenge in a family, both parents still have the right to participate in these meetings with their children, as long as the no contact isn't with their child.
Yeah. Right. If it's amongst them as the co-parents. Yeah.
And
Thank
we,
you. That's super helpful.
we also don't remove just because there's domestic violence. We still go through that whole safety framework. Domestic violence in and of itself is not necessarily a reason to remove.
Right.
So,
Right. Although witnessing domestic violence is definitely a risk factor for child social emotional development.
correct.
So, yeah. Another one of those really big complicated topics that we could have a whole Dad Allies learning session on. Raymond, I want to give you a chance to say one last thing, and I'm going to do a couple promos before I invite you back onto the mic about just if you had one thing that you could say that you would want folks who work with families to know about dads, what would it be? So think about that. But two quick things. Dieter, thank you for putting the evaluation in the chat. We really value your feedback. So please fill that out. We also have our 5th annual Fatherhood Summit coming up May 16, 17, and 18. It will be virtual. They are half days. You can come in for a portion of the meeting. You don't have to come for all 3 days, and there is no cost. This is all supported by several different investors, mostly the Thomas V. Giddens Jr. Foundation. And we really appreciate the time for us to all come together to think about how we accelerate the work around fatherhood at our summit. So please come. And then our next Father Dad's Ally session will not be next month because we'll be doing the summit, but June. And that one will be with the Journeyman Project and Nikki Wilkes, who is the executive director and does a lot of work around rites of passage and ritual and how we heal trauma and bring fathers and men together. And he is fantastic. He does a lot of training nationally on this topic. So we are hopeful that then the next one after that is focused on social justice and fathering. We've had this topic a couple times, but it's been a while, so maybe it's time for us to reconnect to that. And Dieter just put the registration in for the June event. So lots of good ways for you to stay involved. I've noticed a couple of you looking for concrete and right now, where can I plug in? We will, if you want to send an email to Dieter or myself, we can connect you to these wonderful folks at the department to see, because they do have lots of places where they ask for lived experience to come into their process. So Raymond, any last thoughts for everyone? Just a sentence or two about what is it that you would want folks to know or to think about when they think about fathers?
Well, I would like to just say that, anything is possible, and we need to find that space to meet them where they are. Most of us want to be a piece of that process, but often just don't understand how to get there. And so to get that connection, that friendship, that trust built, whatever that looks like in any situation, is probably the most impactful thing that a father can experience, because we do come into this with a us against them mindset most of the time. And anybody that wants to reach out to me or wants me to have a conversation maybe with them or somebody they're working with, feel free to do so. I put my stuff in the chat. So thank you all very much for allowing me to come and share my story today. And thank you, Ann. I always appreciate you. And Dieter, you guys are awesome.
Likewise, the love is coming back at you, sir. All right, thanks everyone. This is a really important topic for us, and stay tuned. That we've unearthed a few other places where it might be worth digging in more deeply, but we're really appreciative that so many of you are wanting to step into this space and learning more about supporting fathers that are in relationship with the dependency process. So come join us at the summit. We'll see you in May. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Anne, does everyone take the survey?
Yeah, anybody that wants to. And if you want to stick around for a minute, we can open up and look at the results after we get everybody signed off. We've done that before. Charles Wood, let's get together. I sent you a note. Send me an email if you can hear me. I'm so excited to see you guys at the table. I just need to take a quick look because sometimes I get scheduled back to back. And I think I have plenty of time to look at the evals and find out I'm supposed to be someplace else. No, not today. Okay. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. I was supposed to be in a meeting right at 1 o'clock. Yikes.
I'm logging in here. Give me a minute. I'll get it.
Okay,
I'll pull it
thanks.
up. Sure.
Thank you.
I opened up my whole day in case of.
Yeah, right,
disaster.
Well, you knocked it out of the park. That was fantastic. Really,
Yeah.
really well done.
Are we still being recorded?